All right, Josh. So, calm your giggle. We'll cut back.
Yeah.
We'll get it back. I promise.
Well, we did it. We're back.
We are back.
We are back. This is the Maximize Podcast, and I'm Josh. This guy's Justin, and today we're going to talk about the power of home equity.
Absolutely. All right, Josh. So we're talking about equity.
Yes.
So this is something of value. So obviously we're going to be talking about Little Debbie Nutty Bars.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Why wouldn't we?
But outside of that, equity, home equity, what are we looking at?
Well, what is home equity?
Well, if you don't understand, equity is value. So when we're talking about the value, your equity, what value you own, it is what you can create in your house above and beyond what you currently owe on it.
Correct. For instance, so if your house right now is valued worth, if you put it on the market right now,
Let's use easy numbers.
$200,000. So if your house is worth $200,000 and you owe $100,000 on it, your equity is
$100,000.
$100,000.
Thank you for making the math easy on me.
Yes, absolutely. So one thing that we're going to do later, a little bit of a teaser, if you will, we're actually going to talk about in the next podcast, we're going to talk about what you can do with your home equity.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about maybe some investment properties, things like that.
Okay, cool. So we're talking about this equity. We gave our little teaser. How does equity work? How do I know if I have equity?
Well, number one, obviously, to know what your house is worth is the best place to start, right? If you have one house or you have multiple houses that are rentals or whatever. But if you look at your one house and you contact a real estate agent and, we use homes like tool or like Homebot.
Yes, it's a tool. Yeah.
So we have this tool. It's called Homebot. We set our past clients up on this thing, and what it does, it gives them a market snapshot every month. It's basically how to use your house as a tool or an asset, right? So using the home equity, these are some of the things that you can do in your life or do with your home, so you can kind of like adjust life accordingly, right?
Sure.
So we'll make sure Zach has the Homebot link in the list below.
Right. So if you need to, you can click.
It's super cool and it's free. So it's a really cool tool. Otherwise, finding out what that equity is in the house, obviously that will dictate what you want to do with that house. So like some people will say equity is good, or like using that equity is good. Some people say using that equity is bad. There is varying schools of thought on this.
Sure. And each school of thought, I think, depends on the person and their characteristics and how they handle their own finances. Yeah. So you aren't... I've seen so much video about building wealth and creating wealth and value in what you own.
Yep.
And everyone wants to steer you into something. And I'm not saying that any one person or influencer is wrong. But if it doesn't fit you, you aren't going to be successful at it.
Correct.
So to jump back into equity, we know how to see maybe what my current valuation is. And then the next portion is obviously what do you still owe in the house? What does the house take to get to that value? So another thing to consider is if our valuation is based on your house looking like all the comps in the area and you desperately need a paint job and a new window and your front door is missing, there's a little bit of work before we get to that equity position.
Yeah.
But if you owe $100,000 and we think your home is worth $200,000, you have $100,000 in equity. Now the final statement on how that's calculated is going to be through whatever financer you look at, right?
Yeah, and there's so like we get the question sometimes like, how do I build equity in the house? Right. So, really there's a couple different ways that you can build equity in a house, right? So number one, the easiest way, like I would say, pay more towards your payment.
Yeah.
Pay more towards your mortgage. Obviously, it's going to bring that balance down. Your value is still going to go up. Your homes right now are still appreciating at a fantastic rate. And so, that's one. Number two, you can do home improvements, right? So you can renovate a bath, you can renovate a kitchen, you can put floors down, all those things that you can do to help draw that price up and drive that value up.
So let's just look at the improvements thing, because you just said it. And I have my opinion of a few, but I'm curious kind of where you stand. We'll probably be in the same place. What are my low cost items to drive a higher valuation potentially in my house? Where's my best maybe bang for dollar right now?
So if you're going to market the house, so if you're going to sell it,
Correct, to get my equity up.
you know, the low cost stuff would be something most people can do themselves. Things like painting.
Yes, absolutely.
You have old, dirty, dingy paint. Go grab a bucket of paint and paint walls.
Light, monochromatic, neutral colors. The best way to go right now.
Absolutely, yeah. Some other, like, obviously depending on square footage, but obviously new flooring is good. Decorating, staging, obviously, like all the things that we use when we go to sell a house,
Sure.
like the staging, the photography, stuff like that. All that will help drive up the value.
And an appraiser who comes in to give you a value, and I'm maybe jumping ahead a little bit,
That's where I was
they're going to look at all those things too.
Yeah, exactly. So like you don't have to sell a house to use the equity.
Right.
So like there are a couple different avenues you can go. Like just like you suggested earlier, you can go to a lender. Lenders. So if you go to the lender and say, "Hey, I have some equity in the house. A real estate professional told me what they think the house is worth. This is what I owe on it. I would like to use this equity for some things. Can you show me how to do that?" Right. So like you can use a HELOC or you can use a home equity loan. So those are two different things.
Okay.
Right. I've used both. I think they're varying, good and bad depending on what you want to use it for. So like,
As someone who's experienced both of those, what was like the process for you? Maybe in each or both of them.
it's so the home equity loan was a lump sum that helped us acquire something. Like we use that lump sum of money, which is a fixed rate too, which is nice. So it's low interest rates. But on the downside of that, the caveat of that is, like, let's say I took out $100,000 of that equity. My actual cost is not $100,000 because there's things like loan origination fees, like processing fees, things like that. So, like it's not like that cut and dry. But general rule of thumb is, like if you're going to take that $100,000 out and you're going to play with it, it's one lump sum.
And correct me, maybe I'm thinking the terminology is wrong, but that's a cash out refinance in some ways as well.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm taking cash out of the equity of my house and refinancing partially. But in my scenario there, I did not actually refinance. I just used the equity out of it. So basically I just took an additional loan or an additional mortgage on the property so I could go.
Okay, so the two different situations that can come about a similar result.
Yeah.
And then the next one then would be a home equity line of credit. Yeah. And for you, what did that look like that was different?
It's basically what it is. The easiest way to look at it is it's a credit card based on the equity of your house. So like let's say I needed $2,500 to replace a few windows in the house.
Okay.
I go and I take money out of the home equity line. I pay the contractor for the money. And I have payments that pay it back, right? The one bad thing about that is it's a variable rate. Mine was a variable rate, so
and a lot are.
Yeah. So like it's just like a credit card. If you don't pay it back, it starts to accumulate. So obviously paying it back obviously is better, right? Because debt's not really a great thing, but you can actually use debt to help grow your portfolio, grow your wealth. If it's done right.
Right. So you talk about debt not necessarily being a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but like we'll say a whole bunch of times throughout every episode or even small clips that we post online, it has to depend on the person and the situation.
For sure, absolutely.
I can't tell you that debt is the absolute way that you need to leverage your wealth for the future if you are absolutely terrible at handling money.
Yeah, for sure.
I can't give you debt if you can't manage what you already have.
So like I've seen this before. So what if I took that hypothetical $100,000 of the home equity or the home equity loan? If I took that $100,000 instead of acquiring something that's going to make me additional money, like what if I say, hey, like I'm going to go buy a car, I'm going to go on vacation. Like I'm going to basically acquire things that are depreciating assets or have no intrinsic value that are not going to help grow my overall wealth.
Right.
Right. So that is a very real thing, right? So like when you have this chunk of money, I'm like, man, that's super cool. Let's go do whatever. and so like you need to be careful about that. Really, you need to be careful about that. But like one of the things, so like one of the numbers that I ran across was in 2021, last year, in 2021, the average homeowner in the United States grew the equity in their house by $55,000 across the board.
That's unreal.
Unreal.
I'd be curious to see if we get the chance to maybe revisit this next week when we talk about investment properties, what that looked like in previous years.
Yeah, that's true.
The actual like percentage growth
that would be
versus years previous.
That'd be really good
Zach,
information.
remind us of that.
Perfect.
Cool. So I think the next thing to go into before we get too far into our teaser is we'll talk a little bit about using equity in a positive way. We talked about building wealth. So you're taking out debt on the value in an asset you have in order to acquire things that produce more wealth for you, whether that be an investment in your business, an investment into other properties maybe, and that's next week. We're talking about investment properties a little bit. What else am I missing? What else can we look at to say if I'm going to purchase something, how do I invest in myself out of this equity?
Yeah, it's going to be real fun conversations because there's various ways that we can go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, if you have equity and you're looking to maybe grow, let's sit down and have a conversation about how that can create wealth for you. And let's look at your individual situation. Maybe it is the right thing for you. Maybe after talking to us, you find out you're not interested in doing the investment property route, but maybe it's still worth you considering the value in your home. But next week, we're going to dive into investment properties. So what if you had a home and you never thought that you could take that $100,000 in equity and turn it into properties that produce you passively monthly income that pays everything that you've done and into the future, that you have an inheritance of wealth to give to the next generation?
It's exciting stuff.
It is very exciting stuff. Very exciting stuff.
Yeah. And that's one of the beautiful things about real estate.
It's an amazing business field.
Yeah, it is. A lot of opportunities.
A lot of them. You want to close us out with something cool and interesting about your favorite little Debbie?
So you may not know this. Actually, I'm sure you know this. I'm not sure our audience knows this. I have a very, very, very large sweet tooth. We can't have sweets in the house because I will eat them all. I will literally eat them all. And
I'm sorry, I just dropped that on you out of nowhere.
So the good news, what I've been trying to do is I've been trying to just eat them all so they're not in the house anymore. And so my favorite little Debbie is probably something like original, like oatmeal cream pie.
No.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, that's it. That's the end of this episode. Yeah. You don't need any more false information like that. Not the best one. We'll see you next week.
Take care.